Right, so I guess we just launch into the panel then. So I can ask a couple of silly questions. Heiko, are you? Yeah, there you are. Is Hendrik already here? I don't see him. We're just going to go ahead and start, which allows you to sit down, which makes it easier to face the silence. Well, we have two companies now that we've seen here. The obvious difference being, Heiko saying you need to innovate, you need to be a leader in a certain area, you need to make an impression and to stay ahead of the crowd, so to speak. Whereas Pascal bravely admitted to just doing well what others already did before, but doing it so well and with a very safe bet, basically, in not trying and exploring roads that haven't been traveled well. One of my first questions, and I get this, especially I think if you look at the graph here, I think that there is a common denominator apart from the fact that most markets see that hype for their product at one point or another, and then there's always the disappointment when markets are overheated. So that is not specific to games market, that's for every market. But I see, or I would assume that there is a fundamental difference between most product markets and the games market with the advent of free-to-play. Namely that if you take the example of the TVs, yes, Grundig and Siemens aren't around anymore, and a lot of Japanese companies came, and now they are outclassed by the Koreans, and they enter Taiwanese, and at some stage, I don't know, an Indian developer might come along and do it cheaper. But you don't see a lot of people still making a lot of money with TVs. Which is why they're trying for innovation again. So there's basically at the end of this here, the consolidation happens, but the fact that most people attack it from lowering the prices means the actual revenue is going down on a lower level, and then people are starting to look again for the next big thing, making that harder for everybody else to copy for a while until there's everybody copying it again. Drivers are brought down. Now for free-to-play, the usual reward for this, like for companies like Apple, is being first there, being the first mover, making a lot of money in a short period of time. Now, if you do the same thing with the free-to-play, you're not necessarily making a lot of money, you're just getting a lot of users in the first place. But the initial advantage of having the market to yourself for a while is, on a free-to-play level, not that valuable. And in time, the fact that everybody's offering free-to-play, you can't get any cheaper. You can't drive prices lower than having a free game. So is free-to-play as a model killing itself? Because it basically means that everybody competes at the same price point, and then the only question is, how long can you stand to offer free games? Because the lifetime value of the users is hard to keep up. They can go to anybody else like this because acquisition is so, going through to another channel, to another platform, to another game is so easy. Acquisition costs are going up, but is there really a way to change that, or isn't it just the fact that it's killing every other model and it's also killing itself?
No.
Thank you. So for my next question.
No, come on. Let's be honest. Free to play has nothing to do with the game is for free. The goal of every game designer, of every monetization expert is to get as much as possible money from the user. So the good thing is just that it's not comparable anymore. In the past, the CD, if this is, I don't know, an EA soccer game or a Konami soccer game, you could compare the prices and the quality or whatever. And today you cannot compare prices anymore. That's just a beauty, I would say.
You know what? Actually, if you ask me, I think that, for example, people that are really hardcore and they play MMORPG, they know that Shaya is more expensive than Runes of Magic. They know that. So I do think that there is some kind of a price tag to games. It's just much harder to find out.
Yeah, that's true.
Also, by the way, communities talk about this, right? I mean, even if you read YouTube comments, you'll see that some people talk about how one game is more expensive than the other.
Is a question of perceived value. I mean, we've seen that in our games, that a lot of people initially said, your games are too expensive because you're going with a certain company that I won't name now, which we are publishing with, and they sort of dictated the prices. And everybody went, well, they're known for having high prices. it's a rip-off company. So there is, I do agree, there is a certain element from the core users, and after all, we know that these are a lot of the interesting ones. I mean, you can take 1,000 people that don't pay anything, but everybody's after the whales, and they tend to be more educated over time. So if we see those price tags appearing and games get more comparable, how would you handle that? I mean, if you say Shaya is more expensive, but it's just better, or what do you do with it?
No, I do think that games are just structured differently, right? There are some games, for example, to stay with that example, Runes of Magic is a PvE game. It's not as competitive as Shaya, which is a complete PvP game, and you see that a PvE game will probably lead to having a load, many people playing that because it's very attractive. PvP is, from the beginning on, will be a smaller niche, but in this smaller niche you can monetize at a higher value. So it's always kind of a combination of multiple factors that lead to the monetization of the game. And it's the same as when you're talking about the stabilization phase there, right? How did the Japanese companies, or Sharp, I'm pretty sure, compared Sharp now and their revenues that they're making with TVs to the revenues that Grundig has been making in the 70s, probably it's like 100x in between, right? Because by doing that, they not only largened their target group that they would address. Sharp is not only talking to German users; they're talking to international users. They have like loads and loads and loads of market potential that they're addressing with a smaller market price. So I do think there's like different ways of getting there. Either you have more people that pay a small amount of money. You have like a small amount of people and they pay a higher amount of money. I think this is just like different ways of approaching the same problem. And by the way, one thing that I wanted to say is, even if I'm now saying the business is, hey, hello, you're there, nice.
Hi, good to see you.
So this is Hendrik from InnoGames. Thank you for appearing.
So even if you now see that the market is not growing as quickly anymore as it used to be, that doesn't mean that you can't be successful as a company, right? I mean, we're not the first industry where the market is not growing with like 25% each year, and still you have successful companies. Look at the car companies or so. They're still companies, and they're taking market share, and they're fighting against each other, going bigger and smaller all the time, making very successful businesses. I think it's just that we have to adapt and kind of understand for ourselves, okay, that was it with the gold rush, and now we have to enter into a new phase of the market. It's going to be a little bit tougher from here, but that doesn't mean that all the companies are going down, right? It just means that the way how we're growing has been slowing down, and that we have to cope with a more, probably solid, but also a more competitive market.
Right. Henry, because you just arrived, we started early because Pascal was a bit quicker and nobody dared ask him enough questions. Maybe just sort of going backwards, we had Heiko and Pascal present their approach to the online games market from, informed of the history of the games they've been making or of the games they've been publishing and looking into the future. What's your take on that, maybe briefly? InnoGames, having come from a very strong single game company to publishing several, how do you see your roots in the company DNA, like Pascal called it, informing what you'll do in the future with regards to mobile, cross-platform, style of games, or whatever your future you might think is looking like?
Okay. Yeah, our roots are based always on high quality games, and that's the reason why we started at the beginning just with one game and then very slowly started to add other games. And for the future, we are not a browser game only company, we are an online game company. That means we also want to develop, or we already released mobile games, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of players really demand this from our games, that they can play our games not only on the browser, but also on other platforms, especially on their mobile clients when they are on their way. And yeah, for us, it's our strengths are clearly in the area of strategy games, and these games are perfectly fit for bringing them to new platforms.
Okay, maybe on that topic, we've seen, like the growth we've seen even on the mobile game market comes from a very small number of genres, basically. There's the odd racing game that's always going to work on some level. We've got, to put it mildly, variations of games that build something up and then send armies over time in order to destroy other people and compete in some way, and whether you call that a Travian clone or a Völker clone or whatever your company's products are clone, it's by and large the same game in a different design. And recently the addition of tower defense games or tower attack games or variations on something you do with a tower that destroys something else. Is there enough innovation in that area? Do you think people are going to look for the next gaming experience, or is there the point where you think that is probably as much game as we can afford to put in and still attract a large enough crowd? I know, Pascal, you are more hardcore, so maybe you've got a different view on that. But Heiko and Hendrik.
Yeah, I think there is another innovation. What kind of game is Angry Birds? So that's kind of a new game, Minecraft. I think there are enough opportunities, but the lazy way or the easy way is just to do something what is successful for a couple of years and just bring it to a different platform, maybe paint it a little bit differently, and then then just launch it and hope that people like it and pay money for it. But as I said, I'm a big fighter for innovation. I think that exactly drives and makes your company very successful, the first mover advantage and so on. But if you want to go the easy way, then just copy something. And I don't say that this is wrong or so. Our company did this as well. Farmorama was launched after Farmville. Even we wouldn't call it a copy of Farmville, but it was a huge success for our company, and it was important that we developed that game. But at the end, if I look long term in our strategy of our company, then we should definitely go for innovation and in different platforms just to be successful long term. Because if you just want to copy, that's tough. Tougher than innovation, I guess.
I would say even in the area of, for example, strategy games, there's still so much room left for innovation and for improving the games. One example, everybody knows today Clash of Clans. They did some very good improvements on this game area, I would say, and really make significant improvements to the user experience, the graphics. And I think we will see similar innovations also in the future. For us, last year we launched with Forge of Empires, also a game which is not just a simple attack game, which has dev tech tree and all that things. So I would say even in the area of strategy games, there's so many ideas which not have been implemented yet, so many things we can improve on, and honestly, so many things which are not really good in the existing games you see on the market, which can be done much better. So I think the potential for improvement is big, and of course every company needs to do this, because if there are too many similar games, it's hard to distinguish from the other games, and if you want to have really high quality, you need something where you're really better than the other games.
By the way, if you feel like joining in or asking a question, please do so and raise your hand, and we'll get a microphone to you. We've got a couple of people from big companies. Oh yeah, there's one, thank you. We've got people of big companies, and I'm just going to address you and ask what Gameforge and Travian are doing these days, because you are here and we trapped you.
Okay, I've got two questions. One is there's this idea that after this gold rush period, everything will get much tougher, and it's true. It's the entry point is much higher in the market, so kind of it's more available to all these big companies, big publishers. Doesn't it mean that kind of all this app store developer thing, where each day hundreds of applications, new games are applied, it's kind of a big hoax? What's your opinion on that? And there's two things, that at one point entry is much more difficult, but on the other hand there are more and more people who want to make games. Another question is, lots of people kind of have this feeling that PC will die out. What are your thoughts on that, and what's your plan in case it happens?
Maybe the first question, trying to rephrase that. So are you clear on the first question? Because I'm not. If anybody wants to answer, because otherwise I just need to ask you. What you're saying is the mobile market is flooded with games. At the same point, everybody is saying the entry costs are so much higher because obviously it's flooded with games, and discovery is the main problem nowadays. It's not even making a game; it's just getting it some eyeballs and growing it in a way. So, what is your question around that? I'm not sure.
I just have this feeling that everyone says, yes, you should make the game. There are lots of these startup hubs, and etc. But actually, nobody is telling that you will fail.
Okay. What you're saying is basically there's 100 million people making mobile games, and 999,000 of those will going to fail, even though everybody tells you have to do a mobile game.
Yes.
So it's overheated. Okay.
But you know what? I think what we see here is a situation of high risk, high reward. Right? You have like loads and loads of competition, but if you make it big, you can be the next Supercell and make $1 million a day. This is the situation, and that has changed a little bit. Before that, you know, in the old times when there was only like 10 games in the market, your chance of succeeding were much higher. But also, if you were succeeding, you were probably making like 200,000 in a month. Right now, if you have a good game and you go up to the top positions in the US App Store, and you're probably in the top 20, you're making 200K a day. Right? So I think the risk profile has just changed, or this has just changed. In the end, you can also see that it wouldn't have been possible to have so many developers if it wasn't so easy to develop the games, right? I mean, if you look back 10 years, you had, like in the PC gaming world, you had like teams of 100 people working 3 years on a game before you even get it out. So very high risk. And now your risk has shifted from the high production cost, it has shifted to a high competition. So the market has just changed. But I don't think it's a hoax, because in the end, look at Supercell. These guys, although they have big investors, they were nothing a year ago, and now they're a multi-billion-dollar company. These things can happen very quickly. So the potential for you as a game developer has increased, and the risk for being kind of never discovered because you have so much competition has increased with it as well.
I would add one point to it. I think you need something to distinguish from the other games. It doesn't make sense to make a game which is similar to all the other existing games in the App Store. You can do this, for example, if you have a big brand, for example, where games like Angry Birds Star Wars also had the reason for success, or you have, for example, as Supercell did, it was extremely super high quality. But just making a game similar as all the others are making it and just hoping that for some luck reason you will be better than them, I think that's not enough. You have something special in your strategy, something special which makes you successful.
I think the big difference, is it on? Yes. The big difference here is that it's so easy for you to distribute a game. You just develop a game, you apply for approval at Apple, and you know when you're online, and then you just hope that people download the game. Browser games was very similar to that, or online games. You just launch a website and hope that people find your website and that they start to play and pay in your game. The console or PC games market industry is a little bit different, because here you need different partners. You need the publisher, you need the distributor, you need the retail store, and so on. And that was quite hard to enter that market. It's much easier. It was easier with browser games, and maybe it's even easier now with mobile games, because not just the distribution, it's a payment, everything is handled by Apple or Android or whoever. So I think that makes it so easy, and that's the reason why we have so much competition. You have less work, but you have much more competition because it's much easier to access this market as a developer.
So, sorry, there's a two-part question, so I'm trying to get to the second part. PC is dead? Yes, no, when?
Not yet. From my point of view, is it on? Yeah. Anyway, from my point of view, I would say it's not dead yet. It's definitely, PC had better times, and I'm pretty sure it's not going to come back to where it used to be. What's going to happen? I don't know. I don't think it's going to die. I don't think PC is going away for all, but you will see that it's going to be on a decrease over the next time. I just returned from Asia, and you see that this drift towards tablets actually is pretty significant, and we will see that taking over. So what I think is that for every company we have to develop capabilities that are beyond the platform. We cannot say, okay, we are a developer for iPhone games, we're a developer for browser games, developer for... That doesn't make sense. You have to build strength that are a little bit independent from the platform. So one of the strengths that Area has that I'm always pointing out is our analytics system, right? And for this analytics system, it just doesn't matter whether we're marketing for a browser game, a PC game, or for a mobile game. It will be the same metrics, and it will help us with the same questions. And so this is a capability that will survive the decline of the PC. It will still be there. We will not care much, and this is where we're investing.
At the end, who cares? Honestly, you know, there are millions and billions maybe of PCs there. You know, that's a huge market. Of course, I tell you, yeah, the market is dead, so please don't develop any PC games. Cool, it's my market then. Yeah, so go all to mobile and compete with each other. You know, I think it just doesn't matter. The market is so big at the moment, so go there. There's another market like mobile, it's growing very heavily. Go there as well. But just because this market is maybe dying in a couple of years or decades, but at the moment there's a market, so I go for this market at the moment.
I would say often such long-term trends or such trends are overestimated in the short term, like tablets, but very underestimated in the long term. And I think in the long term, there is a very, very strong shift. And I would say it makes sense today, already as a publisher to understand, or as a developer to understand these platforms to prepare for this development. So nowadays, you can make very good revenue still on the PC, but there is a very long-term negative trend, and to compensate for this trend, I think it makes already sense to build up some capabilities in other areas.
Quick question. My name is Parker. I'm from PlayMob. We help games companies or users buy charity items in-game, and it's all about the marketing. And I sat through a very intelligent presentation with Zingy, I believe, where they allow you to earn revenue from geolocating your users and get them to go into stores. Is there a focus from your perspective on maybe that secondary market of user engagement and other sort of platforms and schemes coming along to help you engage with those users and increase the value? Or is it more about just getting these users on and making sure that they're playing the game?
Can you explain it?
So I work for PlayMob. So we create an API that allows you to do cause marketing in your game to increase people buying in-game items. So it's really focused at helping games companies to get a higher daily active spend and get first-time spenders to spend. And there's a lot of other people in this space, maybe not focused on doing in-game charity, where the presentation this morning was about driving a gamer into a retail store to get an extra item in-game, and they went into the coffee shop, and if your gamer goes in there, you get paid, where it's no longer about, can I get more users? It's more about getting those ones that aren't spending to actually start spending. Is there a lot of focus from your perspectives of how you can get your users to start spending, or is it just now about the engagement?
No.
So, maybe.
Was that right?
Green, I think, was the right answer.
Maybe to the first question, engaging the users to spend more. I think that's the daily business we have, to find good ways, offer the users good things which they like to buy. Pascal mentions this, building up analytics is one part of it, and just basic work of your product managers of your games. The other aspect of some coffee shops or retail store combinations, we currently don't work on these models. I think they don't fit to our games. For other games it might fit, might be a good idea. For our games it's currently not interesting.
By the way, I just heard some interesting examples in Asia again. For example, where they have famous actors who just say the name of an item and they buy actually that little thing. So in the moment that they apply an item, like, I don't know, like a boost or so, then it would say that name so that everybody around you in that world of the game would hear an actor saying the name of that item that you just, these things are crazy. But this happens in more mature markets when people are competing for the same and trying to be more creative and kind of trying to get the last cent out of every user. I don't think we're there yet. I think for now we can cope with the more traditional methods of monetizing.
Hello, my name is Alex, coming from France. Thank you, Pascal and Heiko, for your lectures. My question is, I understood, Heiko, that you were excellent in innovating, and Pascal excellent in transforming an opportunity to a reality. Would you think that in the coming years, the cost of acquisition of the marketing budget is going to increase? To be in a nutshell, my question is, how in the gold times 2-3 years ago and in the coming 2 years, how much on a 100% budget for production and budget for marketing? Thank you.
So in our company was always like, 10 times of what we have invested in the game, we invested in marketing to buy users. Not to build a brand, it's just to buy users. I don't know if a user acquisition cost will raise in the future. If you can increase user lifetime value, for sure. In the short term, definitely, you will see still an increase in user acquisition costs just because there is still so much competition there. But we are already in the process of consolidation. And as soon as we went through that, I think you will also see a drop of the user acquisition cost. But at the same time, if you can increase user customer lifetime value, then there will be again companies who are willing to spend more per user, and the market is limited. So at the end, there's always a competition about those users. I think what's even more important, not to think about user acquisition costs, is more about thinking about CRM. How do you can keep your users? How can you make your user happy? How can you increase customer lifetime and customer lifetime value?
You know what? Something that I found interesting was I talked to our colleagues in the US, and they told me that over the last year, the acquisition cost for them has been decreasing by like 25%. So not huge, but it has been decreasing. And they think that is because of the shift to mobile. And the US are normally a little bit earlier than we are. And so it seems that the cost of acquisition has actually gone down on the PC side because the mobile budgets are eating up into the PC side, so the inventory is getting a little bit more, there's more inventory right now for PC as there has been before. So that, just to come back to your question.
What?
This was 25%, right? So over the last year, 25% down in the US?
For Europe, I would expect the CPLs to rise in the next 1 or 2 years at least, because the profitability for some games is still high, so I think the CPLs will go up further.
Although do you think we're going to see more companies or less companies just like on the PC side of the market? Because I do believe that we'll see less companies, and the big companies with a little bit less firepower than they had before. So that's why I would think that it's going down.
Maybe more far future, but I think in the next 2 years the CPLs will increase, just because it's still some games which can be run very profitable from a marketing side, and there are some other competitors who spend more money, and everyone tries to spend more money to get the users, and so the prices will increase. I think there is still some room for increase of the prices. Not for forever, but I think for the next 1 or 2 years, at least this is my fear, or however should I call it, yeah.
For sure it will increase because we see more competition. The moment in the European market, the big companies in the European market are European companies. So we will see more Asia companies, we will see more American companies who will enter this market. And just take a look at the balance sheets of some Chinese or Korean companies, how much money they have. They don't care. If they want to buy 20 million users in this market and they have to spend for that 50 million euros or dollars, who cares? They do it. If they want to get into the market and want to become the market leader, they will do it for sure. The question is when and how they do it. Do they do it by company acquisition, or do they do it really by user acquisition? I guess that they do it by company acquisitions, but let's see.
We've talked about now on a sort of very macro level. Looking at different devices, maybe coming back to that again, there is a difference between a mobile game, a tablet game, and a PC game, and even a console game in terms of how you use it. I mean, how long do you use it, where do you use it, what's the user expectations, what's the user profile, and what do you need the game to do? I mean, the famously mobile games can't last longer than it takes you to sit on the toilet or order a coffee, which I think probably the both most used environments for that. On a tablet game, I think it's an interesting point, because a lot of people expect the PC market to shift to tablet because the screen size is vaguely similar in the sense that you can actually see something, and they are used in usually at least sort of a more heavy user type of way. Do you see that shift, and what does it take for a company or for a game maybe to make that shift? Because obviously a full 3D high definition MMO that takes 10 hours to play is probably still going to be difficult on a tablet, because people have a slightly less intensive use model on that. What does it mean for cross-platform? Because I think one of the reasons cross-platform hasn't taken off is there is no game that satisfies all these different user patterns that is actually equally attractive on every platform. So where do you see that going?
I think it really depends on the genre. You know, exactly as you said. If you develop a shooter game, an MMO or something like that, you don't want to play those kind of games on a tablet or even on a phone. You know, the usability is horrible then. You know, those kind of games you want to play on a PC. I think it's similar like a shooter. You know, there are successful console shooters out there. You know, but the hardcore shooter fans, they'll still like to play the game on a PC with a mouse and a keyboard. So I think the similar you will see with other game genres. They stay on a PC. They like this kind of user interface. I don't know what kind of user interface we will see in the future, but just the touch screens we have at the moment on tablets and phones are just not good enough for all game genres we have. So decide very wisely what you want to do with your cross-platform strategy. Just do it for games who have a good user experience on mobile devices.
I would add, for some games it is possible. I think King's game Candy Crush Saga is on a lot of platforms. It's very successful on the iOS platforms, but also on the Facebook platform. So there are some games for them it's possible. I think also strategy games are very well suited for playing them on multiple devices. Some other games, like our new game Katuga, very high-end graphics. It's more a PC-based game because of the controls. This is currently not possible on the iPhone or even not on the iPad. So it depends on the game, and I think strategy games are very good for different platforms.
Maybe a follow-up question to that then. As a rule of thumb, you see that games catering to, without meaning that in a negative way, the lowest common denominator. So casual or mainstream games, obviously huge audience, huge cross-platform opportunity, very low user values per user, because it's hard to monetize people that aren't really engaged in your game very much or for more than 5 seconds. On the other end of the scale, we've got the big client MMOs, high user lifetime, high user RPPUs, very few users compared to the mainstream games. Is that if cross-platform, and I'm still trying to get a sort of more concrete answer, if cross-platform is going to take off, does that mean that games need to shrink to that level? And will PC-style games, console-style games, MMOs, then become a sort of a niche product for very, very engaged gamers, and the main games that are able to make it cross-platform are going to be, again, the more casual games that offer an easy accessibility and a very short session? Do you think that is what's happening? And if so, how would you, for example, Pascal, as a company that traditionally does more engaged games, more core games, and a big point as well to a degree, even Farmorama is more core than Farmville, so to speak, in a sense. How do you operate in that direction? What you're looking for in trying to circumvent that? Or you're just happy with your share of the market then?
I mean, we're doing serious crystal balling here, right? I mean, it's like we're looking...
Educated guesses, I like to call it.
Educated guesses, okay. So, just like some thoughts. One thought is, you always say that the intensity of gameplay on an iPhone is lower than on a core title on a PC. And just to say, I don't know exactly about the session times, or I think that they're really lower on the phones. I can imagine that. But for example, for the revenues that we're generating, if you look at our game Monster Paradise in France, we're generating something like $1.50 on average per daily active user. This is a value that I don't think many browser games have ever reached, and our PC games as well are having a hard time to reach it, because this game is pretty hardcore. And I just don't believe that many people are just playing that very casually on the side. So I do believe that there's kind of the use case for people to just to focus a lot on this game. And although it's kind of a small screen, because it's a card game, so it can be played on this. It's perfect for a card game, because a card is that size as well, right? So it works if the game is appropriate. And then there's other games that I know. There's a game in Korea, for example, which is a soccer management game. And for soccer management, I mean, how much more than this small screen would you need, right? You have different technical formations, and you have different players that you want to look at. But you can actually really do it well on a companion app. So I'm not really sure if this if this really needs to be so different, right? If we're really talking about a very large distance between those people on the PC games and those people on the phones. I think right now that the choice of the genres that we see that is so limited, as you said before, on phones, it only has to do with the fact that the genres that are successful now are those that monetize very well. Because the competition is so high on the marketing side, we just can't afford to go for the very casual titles. Because with the very casual titles, we will never make money because we have 30% to Apple. We have we have 20% or so going to the publisher, to the developer. You have your high payroll for your developers. This is a very challenging environment. That's why strategy games, card battle games, by the way, as well. Those things that really make a lot of money, they are successful at the moment. I don't think it has so much to do with the playtime or with how I think it's more about this.
If you think about cross-platform game, you don't have to think just about copy exactly the same game on your mobile device. Maybe just add some features, some functions to the mobile app. So, for example, in one of our games, or not one of, but almost every MMO we offer, the old users, they don't come into the game just to play the game. They just want to stay in contact with their other friends. So just offer them a chat tool that they can in contact with their other clan or guild members, can talk about maybe strategies, what we want to do in the next days or weeks or whatever. Something like that is enough. Important is that you still have a channel to your user on the mobile device. It's not just offering 100% the same game experience. We tried that once with Hamarama and tried to offer really exactly the same game experience, and we totally failed. We got so many complaints from the users because we couldn't add as fast as we did on online in the mobile space with all the features. So it's just about offering the user the most important feature and maybe some features that they can stay in contact with their other guild and clan members.
I would say, I would agree, it's a big challenge to offer the same features on multiple platforms, and that's currently also one of the reasons why most of the games which are cross-platform with quite more a limited feature set. But it's a challenge, and I think it's a challenge if you master this challenge. It's a high value you generate, because then you can deliver your players very great games which they can play on multiple devices. And yeah, it's hard. You have really to learn it, and also for us, we did some good steps, some not so good steps, and really had to learn this. Now with Tribal Wars, it's a game which doesn't get too much new features, but it's now really live on the Android platforms, on the iOS platforms, and on the browser. And we are able to add features on all of these platforms. But it's challenging and still room for improvement.
With questions, maybe, in the meantime? Fabian. Florian, how are you doing it? I mean, you're in a similar position to InnoGames. You've got a very successful first title, then you build upon that success, and now you come to the point where you need to do something, and you're doing a lot of things. So what's your view maybe on the future? Can you give the guy there a microphone? Thank you.
How are we doing it? Actually, I cannot really add a lot to what the gentleman already said, because we're facing the same situation. Yes, we are a little bit late, I must admit, because mobile has been a big thing since several years now. The first mover advantage is gone, that's for sure. Our games will, of course, be mobile ready, cross-platform ready. But as the other guy said, you really have to think what should the user experience be like, and does your genre, your type of game really fit the needs? You don't have to be cross-platform just because you want to be cross-platform. It's about the user's request, and as the guy said, one game that we're going to bring out will be perfect. There will be something like a shakes and fidget type of game. It will be perfect to have it on the PC, on the tablet, as well as on the smartphone. Other games, well, you just bring it maybe on a tablet, but not optimized for a smartphone. So that's basically what we are doing, and we don't see any difference to what Big Point InnoGames or Area is doing there.
You're all doing the same thing, and we're seeing that, like, in the let's look at the traditional retail model when maybe 10 years ago there used to be a couple of dozen publishers and distributors, very few independent developers left, and if so, they almost transformed into a full publishing house. Nowadays we've got like, I don't know, 7 or 8. There was I remember a graphics from DigiCap that did market analysis, and there was the retail market, there was like 7 or so in the whole spread, and then there was the mobile and online market, and there was literally hundreds, if not thousands, of small, big, and medium companies that all crowded the same market space.
And none of them from Germany.
Big Point, I think, was up there. But yeah, most of them actually weren't from Germany, and most of them weren't even from Europe. Most of them were Asian. But seeing that, if we compare the situation, or is it comparable? Do you see, like in 3-4 years' time, we've got maybe a couple of dozen, and then 7, 8, 9, 10 years down the road, we've got maybe 10 big players, and everybody else will be gone? Because what we do see is that again, the initial cycles all look the same. The initial effects look the same. A couple of people have a runaway success, transform into $1 billion company. But even if we take Supercell as the current, or one of the current success stories, they were already very experienced. It's not like they started out as a bootstrapped company. They got a lot of investment money in. They did their first game, not very successfully, and they didn't care because they still had money left. And then they still have, and to this day, hire almost exclusively very experienced people. So it's not like they are a developer that just came up with a good idea and then made a big success. So that whole, coming back to your question, the whole indie story of Minecraft, for example, it's like the traditional indie, that isn't repeatable, or they're not likely to repeat as often. So a couple of them will come up, but by and large now, with the mobile market already being crowded as it is, and companies like Gree outspending each other, is it going to go downhill fast, or is it going to be a prolonged fight because there's so many different platforms that you might be successful on, and everybody's carving out their own niche? Because it sounds like you all have similar recipes, but I've seen and heard that already in the years of the games industry, and most of the time, if nobody has a different recipe for success, then by and large, logically, most of you won't survive in the long term because there's no distinction between you and the other company, and then it just comes down to who's either lucky or who's got enough money. Because that's the two ways you can make a success.
Or who's innovative.
Who's going to be innovative enough?
That's exactly the case. 10 years ago, if you would tell someone, you play games in the browser, which are looking shitty, and you even there for free, and you pay for some virtual items, and this will create $1 billion market, no one would have believed that. The same in Facebook, a social network where people would like to just post some text, photos, videos, that people like to play games there, and this is $1 billion business too. So I think, we will create new markets. There will always be new markets, and there will be always innovation. If you are a first mover and if you are innovative, you can be successful even as an indie company and can become a big company. And that's just how it works. And the big companies who have the big pockets, they will buy those kind of companies because they are not innovative. They buy innovation in the most cases.
I think that Facebook and the Facebook gaming hype cycle is pretty good blueprint as how I think about the future for mobile. So in the beginning we had like loads and loads of companies, and they were outspending each other. A lot of company actually went belly up over time because they were just spending too much on marketing. It was very, very competitive. A lot of companies went down. A couple of companies actually made it big because they had a mix of being innovative, being smart, Zynga, also having deep pockets, and then executing well in cross-selling to other games. And then they took this one hit that they had, Farmville, and they enlarged it and made it bigger, turned it into a big Ville franchise, and made a lot of money on top of that. Or actually lost a lot of money, but make a lot of revenue on top of that, at least. So this is a very interesting thing. So that means that in the beginning there's the big land grab. People go in and then they build their huge following, these huge audiences, and then they start to distribute across different games. And that's interesting now to see if this is going to happen with Supercell, if that's going to happen with Kabam and these other companies that have a lot of audiences there, because this is actually what will make them successful in the long run, right? Not to only have the one game that got them there by being creative and innovative, but then to largen it up and make it into a real company.
But for example, Supercell clearly says they don't want to grow too fast as a company, and from their perspective, it makes sense.
Only to 300 million in a year.
They are growing extremely well on in the revenue side, but on the number of people they employ, they are quite a small company. So that's a very interesting story in this way, I think.
Yeah, hi. Actually, a question of talent, which really hasn't been addressed yet. First, I'd like to say it's interesting that Notch of Minecraft fame, ex-king programmer, probably quite used to scaling, quite used to handling a prototype that does well, and just on the idea of Supercell having experienced people. So we touched on the marketing spend and what that does, and the competition there and how it harms some companies and some companies do well. Tech, building platform and building institutional advantages like areas, metrics, crunching team and tools. But talent, is that going to be a crucible as well moving forward? Some people are going to have advantages in attracting talent, I assume. They're going to have good corporate cultures, good quality of life issues, deep pockets, high salaries. Are going to do like Supercell and attract a lot of senior people with great experience and good chemistry. Any thoughts on that?
Talents are key, I guess, because they at the end develop the game, they analyze the game, they're marketing the game, and so on and so on. So I think that's definitely a bit, and I know it from Hamburg, unfortunately, as maybe the biggest company in Hamburg, there's already talent war. I think almost every month a couple of our employees leave to one of our competitors. Huh?
Sorry.
So that's definitely one of the issues. So and there's always another company who's more attractive at the moment because they offer something great, or they have a great game or great IP or whatever. So that's you as an employer. You have to take care that your employees stay in your company and that you keep your talents in there. And I think to get good talents, find good talents, that's not the problem, but to keep them, that's really the challenging part.
I think the other challenge is also to say clearly not to grow too fast. I had this example of Supercell, and I think that's quite clever from them that they say, well, we don't want to grow too fast. We don't want to have everyone working for us. We are really selective on this one, and this makes sense. If you grow too fast, the people maybe make wrong hires, you lose the identification, you get internal struggles and all that problems. And I think it's better to grow on a consistent basis and have everything under good control, and then the revenues also can grow faster than your HR growth. I think it's important to really focus on only the good people and have really good teams which deliver great results. And it's a big challenge, but it's possible.
They are a limited resource. There's not so much talent around, but that's what you're saying.
Top talent is a limited resource.
It's clearly a limited resource, and it limits your growth.
I guess what I'd like to see discussed is the talent war in the same level of abstraction as the marketing war, for instance, or the technology war that has been discussed. It tends to switch over to very soft sensibilities when it's down to staff, but it's can it be quantified in any similar way as the other competitive arenas, or is it absolutely unique compared to them?
I think that you can't really compare like the marketing budget, the spending that you have for a marketing budget, to the spending that you have to keep employees and to get. I think for us right now the much more pressing problem is how the heck can we make this marketing stuff in mobile work, right? This is really complicated because you can really measure it, and you see that you're losing loads and loads of money if you're not being careful, because the competition is so high and because the prices have gone up to a level where everybody knows, okay, now I'm losing money. This is where everybody steps spending money at the point where they start losing money, right? And for HR related concerns, this is still for bigger companies a very important topic, but it's not as threatening as if you're having a negative return on your marketing investments. So probably that's why it's become a little bit less of a topic compared to probably like a year or two ago. But still it is, definitely.
Okay, we're approaching the end of the thing, but maybe a last topic that I want to try. in the life cycles of a games market, there's usually that early phase where acquisition is relatively easy because there's not a lot of offers. Then it becomes more expensive, which is what we see in mobile now, and to a degree on browser. And the acquisition wars start, and then it's all about retention. And then I think that's a lot of what you said goes into that direction, where it goes, you need to keep the user in your system, you need to engage the user in a different game that's still your game, or at least then sell him to a competition. So you make some money with users leaving. There's a couple of, or there's a whole market around monetizing playing users that don't pay with advertising, with engagement, with whatever. The one answer that has been increasingly popping up, and which was sort of laughed at a couple of years ago in the online games market is, and we also see it in the mobile games market now, is brands. Now, BigPoint has been strong on brands, I think, from very early on, when other companies still thought they could just sell a game. But brands is in my mind, a very elusive thing. I mean, what constitutes a brand? The fact that you got a name, the fact that people are engaged with you doesn't actually make it a brand yet. It's not recognizable necessarily to anybody else. It doesn't have its own pull. It doesn't even have its own image, because usually with a brand you attach some sort of meaning to it. There's a positive or negative, but there's some qualities that, like Apple stands for something. Now it's become a brand. How would you go about building those brands? I mean, are you actively doing something beyond making a game attractive enough so people are not ashamed to play it, or is it like, what do you do in order to have a brand, other than buy it, obviously, which is a good point?
So first of all, I totally agree. Brands are really, really important, especially if user acquisition costs are rising. So that's really one of the things you have to consider here. How do you build a brand? But building a brand is very expensive, either from a marketing side or from a quality side. So that's one of the things. But also what we have proven with, and we haven't created many brands, but we use many brands like Ice Age and Battlestar Galactica and something like that. And what we have seen is that the trust of the user is much higher. So you can buy users cheaper, just because they believe in the brand. You can book on search items which you are not able otherwise to book keywords for. The other thing is that the users stay longer in the game, especially at the beginning. So they give a game a higher chance to be a good game. If you have a no-name game and the user doesn't understand or doesn't like the game in the first 5 minutes, the churn rate is much higher on non-IP based games. And also from a long-term point of view, even that, Zynga wasn't really successful. They just shut down Farmville 2 and so on. But at the end, I still believe in sequels also in the online industry. So building a brand will help you also maybe to create sequels in the long term. But you have to be very careful with that, because shifting a community from one game to the other game is quite tricky. But anyway, brands will be very key for you long term. If you see what happens in the console game market, what are the successful drivers for EA every year? That's FIFA, Madden, something like that. Games which are launching every year, or Command & Conquer and so on, Call of Duty. So many things you can mention there were really the big titles for the publishers. So I think brands in the online games industry don't exist that many. But I think we will see brands in the future here, and they will be the really successful titles long term.
I think brands play a more important role, especially on the mobile platforms. When you see the app stores and you recognize a brand, this is also makes it easier to attract users. Some of the very successful games, like the Simpsons game, is a very successful example for an iPhone game, or Angry Birds Star Wars, or so, The Hobbit. So there are some games which are very successful with brands. On the other hand, as a developer, you always want to make sure that the brand doesn't limit you too much. I mean, the ultimate goal is to make a great game for your players. And if the brand has too much restrictions, this could hurt your game experience. So that's key for a developer, should always be to make sure that the brand doesn't hurt the game experience. And the most successful games on the mobile platforms are currently games which build their own brands, like Clash of Clans, Heyday, Candy Crush Saga, or so.
Pascal, I mean, having admitted to not being the innovator, how do you build a brand? I mean, you're not using an established, you're not buying into an established IP.
I think for any game, the first thing that you want to have is a good game, right? And the brand, will only help you so far. If you don't have a good game, the rest will not come. So people will probably start your game a little bit more often because they see they see you on the app stores and they trust you and they go into it. But very soon you'll have the first YouTube review saying that your game is crap, and then it will just not help you much. It will help you if you have a good game, and then on top of that you have a good IP. But I think that overall in the free-to-play business, the way how to build from nothing into a brand is to consider a game a little bit like Supercell does, not as like a one episode, but more like a soap opera, where you want to deliver content every day. Every day so there's something new to discover. Even the most hardcore fans of the daily soap operas would not watch the same episode for years, right? But if there's just something new happening again and again and again and again, you'll have time that the people will be playing your game and will be getting used to you, and you will stand for being that game that always comes up with new entertaining stuff for your players. And this is actually what matters, and this will shape your brand. So taking care of your users, making sure that they have something new to discover every day, I think that's what in the end will make your brand.
Anybody else want to take the chance to have a question? Well, okay, I think we've got a lot of areas covered. A lot of topics we discussed. Obviously, it's all crystal balling, but I hope you've got, as the audience, got a bit of an insight into the great minds of our online games business and what they think about the future. Thank you, gentlemen, for attending. Thank you, Florian, for pitching in.